Let's get started. So something that a lot of people often ask me, and this is why I do these webinars, I speak to a lot of expats from all over the globe, and very often the one question that keeps coming back again and again is, well, where do I set up my savings in my investments? What are the options available to me? Do I do something back home? Do I send my money back there? Or do I keep it actually abroad? Are there perhaps other or better options available to me now that I am living abroad? And if doing so, what currency should I invest in? Do I use more than one currency just to be safe? That whole not keeping all your eggs in one basket. What are the tax implications when it comes to savings and investments? And also, what happens if I die and all this money or savings is stuck somewhere abroad? What happens then? This is the background reason for why I've started doing these webinars. Now, a bit about me. Let's start off with that. Matthew Taran, my name. I am a international wealth manager. I've lived and worked abroad for many different years in various different jurisdictions. I work for a company, Holborn, which is a global company. I'll tell you more about them in a moment. And my expertise and specialties lay within the tax structuring and also the investment side of things. I am internationally qualified. All advisors and wealth managers with Holborn are required to be. I myself, through the Chartered Institute for Securities and Investments, which is the industry leader when it comes to financial education globally. So let's tell you a bit more about the company, Holborn. We started just over a quarter century ago in the late 90s with the expansion of the UAE, in actual fact, when a lot of expats flocked over to that area and needed financial advice with regards to their offshore assets, their savings, their pensions, and so on. And this is then how we eventually came about, servicing that international market. We are currently the second largest independent wealth advisory globally. We have circa $3 billion in terms of assets under advisement, and I'll get shortly to why that sort of size makes a difference. And we have licenses and offices in over 13 different jurisdictions spanning the globe, making us a truly independent advisor. If we look into the far side, into the east, coming out of Australia, Vietnam, Thailand, Hong Kong, Malaysia, coming through into Mauritius, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, in Europe, Portugal, Cyprus, Spain, the UK, South Africa, and all the way through to the other end in the US. Managing, as I said earlier, just shy of $3 billion. And that makes a very unique difference to what we have access to when it comes to looking for solutions for our clients. What makes us different to many other companies and what we've built our success on is what we call those 5 pillars of our business. That size, that, as been said earlier, that managing shy of $3 billion, being international, it gives us access to providers and solutions, and we're able to get preferential rates with different companies, which benefits our clients. That fact that we are a truly independent advisory, so our independence is very important. That fact that, let's be honest, in the local industry, I worked back home for a blue company. And let's face it, it doesn't matter what conversation we were having. If I still worked for them, I would give you one of their products. It's just how it works. Whereas now we're able to choose who we work with. Based purely on merit to our clients with great impartiality. So I'm able to find a solution that suits you, where you are now, where you've come from, where you plan to end up, based on what you need, not what's available to me with the one company I work for. The third thing is our service, the fact that we pride ourselves in terms of making sure we're in front of our clients at least once a quarter. That way, be it through Teams or Zoom lately. That way, our clients are always being kept up to date in terms of market conditions, changes in legislation, any new funds or changes within the international world. And this is why at the end of last year, we won 8 international investment awards. They're like the Oscars of our industry. Another reason or another pillar of our success is the fact that our wealth managers and advisors are required to be internationally qualified. So you'll find that we are the best educated when it comes to advice. if we compare that to your private banker or your financial advisor back home, it's very different. Our side, I compete more with those sitting in London, Dubai, New York, Hong Kong, Geneva, and they will have the licensing and accreditation, whereas your local advisor or private bank back home won't have that licensing, that accreditation, the knowledge, or even the experience when it comes to advising clients in other jurisdictions around the globe. And that makes us very different. Another reason, as mentioned earlier, is safety of client money. When it comes to creating solutions and looking for solutions, we take that client money very seriously. So we will often look at jurisdictions such as Guernsey or Jersey, Gibraltar, the Isle of Man, Malta. So very often places with strong ties and links to the UK. So we'll only look for jurisdictions where we know the governments can actually back the investment, put a guarantee on that sort of capital. So we take that client safety very seriously. So that's what makes us, and that's how we've managed, what makes us different, how we've managed to build our success. So back to why we're initially here, and that is, why do we invest and where do we do that? Now, if we're going to find a solution, what are the reasons why people invest? Why do people actually save money? There's that short-term savings. You need an emergency fund. What happens if you're without a job, or you get ill, something happens? To finance future studies, holiday travel, to get married, or you're having a baby. And those are all short-term, the sort of 2, 3, maybe 4, 5-year savings that you're building up for a particular reason. Then you get that more medium to longer term. That fire, being able to be financially independent, not living month to month or coming back one day with nothing. Or those who want to be able to retire early. There are other options where people just want some kind of nest egg, that financial security, knowing they have something they can fall back on one day in their 40s, 50s, 60s, whenever, or their retirement, that they have something, again, not ending up 50 or 60 with nothing, or realizing you've been living abroad for the last 10, 15, 20 years and saved nothing. And now you've got 10, 15 years left before your visa runs out and you're not going to be able to renew it anymore because you're getting too old. That for others, it's breaking that loop of poverty. You don't want to have to live off your parents, and then when you have kids, they have to live off you. You want to be able to, break that loop and be self-sufficient. And then there's kids' education. You've just had some children, and you want to make sure that you can afford their high school and the university fees in 10, 15 years' time. Or those who want to be able to build a property portfolio and build up enough money to own 3, 4, 5 different properties, in the UK or in other primary jurisdiction countries. So if that is what you want to do, then how do you decide where? Let's look at that. The most basic point. Do I send my money back home? And in home, since this webinar is mainly aimed at South Africans, but it's applicable to many other jurisdictions too. Ask yourself the following question. On a scale of 1 to 100, let's say, what does your gut tell you? So hedging your gut, what is your own personal view on South Africa? Do you see things getting better? Do you see things staying the same as they are? Or do you see things getting worse, perhaps? That 1 to 100. And let's say at number 1, at the bottom end of the scale, you see things going that Zimbabwe route, the currency, the rand continuing to weaken, that political instability, still not knowing which government's going to be in control, whether they're losing power or not, whether they're going to be going to coalitions, whether the laws will change, that corruption that continues, inflation spiraling as it has, still suffering with high crime and violence, that unstable power supply. Do you see things continuing in that direction? Or do you see things perhaps getting better, going that Singapore route, as I like to call it, where you come from a similar background, but now the currency has become stronger, it's stable, it's secure, it's politically stable, there's low inflation, the unemployment is low, it's a stable, strong economy, a place that you in your old age, your kids, your grandkids, future generations will be able to make a success of their lives. Where do you see South Africa going? If you think things are going to go that Zimbabwe route, well, then you should probably keep your money out of South Africa, keep it abroad. But let's face it, if things do go the other and things go that Singapore route, well, you can always bring your money back. But it's not so easy to do the opposite if things do go south. So ask yourself, and then you decide, look, if I think it's maybe 30% going to South Africa, the Zimbabwe route, then keep 70% of your money abroad. Now, let's look at some of the things that will affect your wealth, that will affect your savings. And let's start off with that basic question, what currency? Whether you see South Africa getting better or getting worse, let's look at the currency. Now, the easiest way I've found to explain currency to clients is to look at it as the share price of a company. Would you invest in a company? Would you send your money to a country and invest there? The share price of a company, well, it measures the health of that actual company. Is it a good company? Is it a strong, stable company? Or is it maybe, having difficulties? Same with the currency, the rand, the ZAR. It measures the health of the economy. The desire for our exports, our services and our goods, people wanting to buy South African things, making that currency stronger. It gives you a sentiment on the effectiveness of the management of the company or the government, and its policies. Is it being run well, or is it not being run well? Where is that money going? The trust in the CEO of the company, or in our case, the president and his board, his cabinet. Are they able to do their jobs? Are they well educated? Do they have what's needed to make success, to drive things forward? And it reflects the expectations of the future return. So simply, the share price of a company tells you if it's got a good, strong share price, well, there's a good potential for growth, for giving you a good return, a good dividend, just like the currency. A good, strong currency, there's a good, strong potential for growth. So do you want to be putting your money into, a rand-based sort of investment? Do you see the rand as being strong? It's going to strengthen. It's in a currency that's good. The country's being well managed. Ask yourself those questions and then decide, should it be in rands or should you do it in a different currency? Now, let's have a look at that rand and something like that we like to call the ZAR slide, the rand slide. Now, here I've compared it to 3 different primary currencies. I've taken it against the euro, and to not be biased and to be impartial, I've gone and done it against the dollar as well and against the pound. And within all of those, this is now over the last 5 to 10 years, you can see there's been a consistent decline in the value of the rand. On average, no matter which of those primary currencies we're looking at, you're looking at an average of 5%. And this is the thing, you ask yourself very simply, take everything else out of it and ask yourself, here's an investment. I know it's going to give me negative, so not growth, but I know I'm going to lose 5% every year. Does it sound like a good investment? Just from the currency side, take everything else out of it. Does it sound like a good investment to have your money lose 5% every year? And that should guide you as to what currency, at least, you should have your investments in. So back then to, do we send it back home or do we keep it abroad? We've looked at the currency. Currency says not in rands. I don't want my investments to go down every year. I want it to go up. So what is the other thing that plays a role into it? Now, living outside of South Africa, you have a lot of options, a lot more options than you are available to back home. And tax is one of those things that you can use to help improve the growth of your investments, to help make them more efficient, to get the most out of them. And let's look at that. If we look at South Africa is known as a high tax jurisdiction. We are up there with the UK, the US, France. On average, if you were to take like a teacher's salary living abroad, in South Africa, your average income taxes would be around 31 to 41%. The lowest tax bracket in South Africa is 18%. Now, let's compare that to places like Korea, where on average you're looking at between 3 and 5% taxes. In China, you're looking at an average between 20 to 39%. The lowest tax rate in China is 3%. So chances are you're paying a lot less tax now where you are than if you would be back home. So does it make sense to send your money back to a country where you'd be paying more tax? ask yourself that question. Do I want to send my money back to a country where I will end up paying more tax on it than I would if I just kept it now? Living abroad, though, you now suddenly have those options to, well, what other options are there? Well, what about the Isle of Man? Guernsey, the Bahamas, those are what we call low or no tax jurisdictions, and their tax rates are 0%. You now have the opportunity to send your money somewhere where you pay no tax on it. And one thing I can guarantee you, you can look at any website, any calculator, ask any financial advisor, any banker, anyone on the planet, which is better, a tax-free savings or a savings where you pay tax on it. And there's a reason why all those calculators, all those websites, no matter which company you go to, all the examples show you that tax-free savings grows better because, well, you're not having that tax eating away at your savings. The problem, though, is that with South Africa, the only way you can grow your money back home free of tax is either through a tax-free savings account or through a retirement pension style plan, an RA. Now, what are the pros and cons of that? Well, with a tax-free savings, the most you can save is 3,000 Rand a month, or you will be hit with a tax penalty of 40%. So that doesn't make it a good solution. The other side is that retirement annuity or pension style. The problem with that is that, yes, it grows free of tax. It's brilliant. But the day you retire, then you have to pay tax at an income tax rate. And income tax is one of the most expensive forms of tax that there are. And there is no choice. You have to take at least 2/3 out as income, as a pension that gets taxed as income. So from the Rand, it makes no sense to send your money back home. Keep it abroad. Or if you're going to send it home, keep it in dollars, pounds, or euros. From a tax point of view, rather send your money somewhere where you're not going to be paying tax on it. That may keep more of that value, again, make it more efficient. The other side of it, though, is if you're going to send it back home, put it into some kind of retirement plan so it can grow free of tax. There you're going to be hit with what's called Regulation 28. Now, what is Regulation 28? How does that affect me and my savings, that growth? Well, very simply, Regulation 28 limits where you may invest, and currently 55% must be inside South Africa. The other problem with that is that if you think that of that 55%, and you'll see that I've highlighted on the right-hand side, given the volatility, with how up and down markets are, and the fact that over the last 10, 15 years, the amount of shares on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, what you can invest in, has shrunk considerably. It means your options in what you can invest in have shrunk. The other side of it is that with Regulation 28, you have that danger of what is known as prescribed assets. Now, prescribed assets is where the government can tell you, right, of all of your retirement savings or your pension savings, X%, 10, 15, whatever it is, must go into saving Eskom or the new health program they want to launch, or it needs to go into sharing up SAA. And you have no choice in that. And it's not that they need to go and change all sorts of laws and things. There is legal precedence for it. It has been done previously in the past. So it can be done. And as we know, some of the new parties who were running for elections this year, one of their mandates was that they wanted to be able to do that, use money for the actual pension money for the health, the program that they want to launch. It tells you also not only that, but it goes further into, well, how much you can invest into property, how much can go into shares, which asset classes you can and can't invest in. So it does affect the actual growth of your investments. If you're the sort of person where I want to be able to take more risk now while I'm young and make that money grow as fast as I can and go into offshore equity, you can't do that. You have to do what the government says you are allowed to do. And that's what Regulation 28 does. There's another part to that, and that is Section 65. So Section 65, when it comes to your investments back home and your savings, basically it's Section 65 comes from the Collective Investment Schemes Control Act, so CISCA. And basically what it does, it says that if you want to be able to promote, sell a fund, an investment fund inside South Africa, It has to be approved by this particular government body. And very often, to be listed as a fund in South Africa, not very often, you must actually, you have to have an office or a representative inside South Africa. And you have to pay fees to the South African government to be able to sell your things. Currently, well, this is as of last year, there were 627 international funds approved. Now, if you compare that to the 131,000 funds, open-ended investment funds that are available internationally, that's 0.4%. As someone put it to me, an investment manager a few years back, it's like going to a buffet. Imagine a huge buffet at one of these big international hotels in Shanghai or in Seoul, and you're only allowed to choose from the bread. No meats, no desserts, no seafood. You're only allowed to choose from the bread. So why limit yourself? And that's what Section 65 essentially does. It limits your investment selection, your choices. If we compare, one of the largest financial service providers in South Africa, they have access to 260 funds, both local and offshore. And they at that time were worth 22 billion. Now, despite them being one of the largest or the largest in South Africa, it equates to only 0.2% of, if we take an international company like BlackRock. That's how small it really is compared to that global space. Or 1.4% of Franklin, or even nearly 3% of Goldman Sachs. So they, the selection that we have when you live in South Africa is vastly, vastly selective. It's shrunken so much that, if you're going to get the most out of your money, you need to take into consideration those big global hard hitters, that you would have access to and that you do have access to living outside of South Africa. One could ask yourself, well, does that size really matter? So what? We're 0.4% of the global size. So what if it's 1% of the someone like Franklin Templeton? Well, if we look from an investment perspective in terms of size, most of the world's global stock markets are in the northern hemisphere. There's very, very, very little in the southern hemisphere. That's where most of the wealth, most of the money sort of lies. Look at it from a brand size instead of just stock market size. If we look at Google, ABC, Toyota, Starbucks, Amazon, Microsoft, Nike, any of those big brands that you can think of, they're all in the northern hemisphere. None of them are in the southern hemisphere. In terms of the top brands, if you take a look at the top 500 most valuable brands, even what we call the Magnificent Seven, Amazon, Google, Netflix, Apple, Facebook, Nvidia, all those companies, Apple, Samsung, they're all in the northern hemisphere. There are only 2 countries in the southern hemisphere that has any entry on the top 500. And those are Brazil with 6 brands and Australia with 4 brands. South Africa has none, not a single one in the top 500. But you're telling me at the same time, I'd rather take all my money and put it in South Africa, in rands, despite the fact that I feel it may go a Zimbabwe route or may not, I'm not sure. Should you be gambling with your future wealth? So what alternatives are there? RCO, and this is the thing. This is where everyone gets to that point. They ask me, what else can I do? Well, very simply, you need to make sure that A, you speak to someone that has the actual licenses and accreditation, and not only that, but the experience and knowledge to be able to advise you and structure your savings and your investments abroad. Somewhere where if the best solution for you is an investment out of the Isle of Man, that he can actually do it or she can actually do it. Or if the best solution for you is something out of the US or something out of the Bahamas or somewhere out of the UK or somewhere else, that they can actually set up those investments for you in a country that best suits you, not only where you've come from, what passport you hold or whatever, but where you want to one day end up. You need to be able to make sure that you invest in a hard currency. Find something where your money can go directly into dollars pounds, euros, Swiss francs, for example. So it's not losing value every year with the currency. Look for well-known, established international companies, ones that are regulated, and not just regulated in one or two different jurisdictions, but look for ones where you know they're regulated in multiple jurisdictions. That way, you know the companies have lots of regulations which they need to adhere to, and that they're able to do business in lots of different countries. Try and find yourself something. Make sure when you speak to whoever it is that you're speaking to, A, I want to be able to invest in this, and this currency, dollars, pounds, euros. I want to be able to know that you are highly regulated. And I want to be able to know that you can set something for me where my money doesn't have to be eroded by tax, where I'm not going to be paying more tax than I'm currently paying. Somewhere where you have access to global funds. Tell them I don't want only a short range of funds that's restricted because of the laws within a particular country. I want to be able, if I want to be able to invest in BlackRock, that I can do that. If I want to be able to invest in company X or company Y, I like their funds where you're able to actually do that. And then also look at costs. At the end, ultimately, very often, a lot of the time it comes down to costs. Clients always are cost conscious nowadays, particularly South Africans. We're used to a very expensive financial services market. There was someone else who used to tell me, and you look around, you see it may very well be true. It's always the banks and the financial companies that have the biggest glass, shiny buildings in South Africa. Who knows if that's true, but it certainly appears that way when you walk through the city. But aside from that, you want to be able to know that your costs when it comes to investments, and that you can compare them to other companies, not only local in South African companies, but international companies. Don't be stuck with just one choice and, well, that's what everyone else charges. Have a look at the costs. And very often you want to be able to choose fees where those fees don't just carry on for life based on whatever the value of your investment is. Paying X% fee on something where you've only got 10, 20 or 30,000 is very different to when you've grown that money into 1, 2, 3 million, and now you're paying that same fee on that 2 or 3 million. Then it becomes a lot more expensive. So have a look at costs and how those costs are charged. That is very important. Ideally, you want something where that cost is not for life. So let's summarize that then, if we have a quick summary. If you send your money back to South Africa and invest it there versus if you set something up internationally, some kind of regular savings product abroad where we can get the benefits of that medium to long-term growth, but have better options. Well, in South Africa, you'd be stuck with that Regulation 28. Offshore, there's no Regulation 28. And in South Africa, you'd have to deal with Section 65 in terms of those restricted funds that you can use, whereas offshore, you don't have that. In South Africa, if you're going to make that money grow free of taxes, is the tax-free savings, which means you're stuck at 3,000 Rand a month, which is not going to get you rich. So the alternative is retirement funds, but there you have no access until age 55. Whereas with a lot of your international products, you have a 2-year restriction. And after that, you start to gain access from year 3, and more and more access as you go along, depending on the terms and what sort of products you choose. But they're a lot more accessible than your South African retirement style savings. The other side of it is if you go that retirement route in South Africa, yeah, you're going to grow free of tax, but you won't be able to take out all your money. If your aim is to buy a bunch of properties and live with rent, you can't do that. In South Africa, you must take 2/3 as a pension. Why? Because then it can be taxed as income. And in fact, it has to be taxed as income. Whereas internationally, if that is your plan, so I've changed my mind, and 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, I'm going to use this to buy that property there and use this portion to put down a deposit on that. You can structure a lot more easily from an international perspective. In South Africa, your fees are based on the value of the investment, the fund, as it grows. So as it becomes more and more, you pay more and more fees. Whereas internationally, very often your fees are based on an initial sort of period, on a time period, between 1 and sort of 2 years. And then with a lot of your South African companies, if you need to withdraw money, it'll only pay out inside South Africa. And your retirement funds particularly can only pay out in South Africa. It's a huge rigmarole if you've now moved abroad and you need to get access to that money. You can't before age 55, and after age 55, it's a huge amount of paperwork. Whereas If you have an international investment, well, it pays out to you wherever you are. So there are pros and cons in terms of doing that. I'm going to start that poll now for those who would like to who would like to ask any questions. Let me stop sharing. I see there is some questions already coming in. Let's have a look at those questions. Let me load the poll. There we go. So if you wouldn't mind, those of you on the call, if you take part in the poll, it helps with you refine the questions for what we do the next time. So let's have a look at that then, at some of those questions that are coming through. What about a tax-free savings account and NP 500? So I'm going to answer that live. Well, so hopefully, if we go back in terms of that screen, tax-free savings account. And I did this when I did a property webinar last year. We compared tax-free savings accounts and what a lot of the different companies say. Whether you look at, if we're talking about back home, whether you look at Old Mutual, whether you look at Sanlam, whether you look at Allen Gray, whether you look at Liberty, whether you look at Discovery, ABSA, any of these banks, all of them will show you very clearly that a tax-free savings account grows faster than any kind of other regular savings account. There is no argument about that. It does grow faster. The problem comes, though, that anything above that 3,000 Rand a month must be taxed or will be taxed at 40%. You'll pay a tax penalty of 40%. So imagine now you're living in Korea paying roughly 3.5%, 4% tax, or you're living in China and you're only paying sort of 25% tax, but you've sent your savings back somewhere where you're paying 40%, nearly double, or way more than double if you're in Korea. So why do that? Why not, if you have this, since you now have the choice living abroad, why not rather set up that savings in the Isle of Man or in the Bahamas or in Guernsey, because you now have a tax-free savings account and you're not limited by that 3,000 Rand. If you want to put in 20,000 or 25,000 or 10,000, you can do that without any tax penalty. And where if you wanted to invest in the S&P 500, you now can. If you wanted to put everything into that, if you wanted to put 100% of your money into the S&P 500, well, you can do that. There is no Regulation 28 or Section 65, which limits where you can, what you can, and what you can't, or where you can't. If you're that sort of investor and you want to take that sort of aggressive, I want to make money grow as much as I can, and I like the S&P 500, you're able to do that, and you're able to do so in a tax-free environment. So there's another question. So when it comes to setting up your savings abroad, which banks or companies would you recommend? Now, to understand the difference between savings and investments, there's a well-known expression that savings has never made anyone rich. It's investing that makes you rich. Savings is more that shorter term, that emergency fund, that holiday, that getting married, that wanting to pay for a deposit on a house, or buy a car. That's what you do with savings. You put your money into the bank. It's not going to grow quickly, but it's secure, relatively safe, depending on which banks you go with. It's that slow and safe. It's not going to make you rich, but it's slow and safe. Investment is where the aim is to make that money grow, to get the most out of that money. And there are all sorts of things, you can be an aggressive investor where the aim is to make that money grow as fast as possible. And there's a lot of risk involved. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. It's like a roller coaster. But you get those where maybe you want a bit of a, you're in the middle. You're not a very aggressive person. You want a balance. So you want some protection as well as growth. And you get those who, they want to invest their money, but they want to do a bit more than what the bank would give them, but they also want to lean more towards that safety sort of side. And those are your more cautious conservative investors. And that's when we look at investment companies. Now, which companies would you choose? Well, very simply, you're not limited by the ones that are in South Africa. You now have access to, well, basically almost any company you'd like to set up your investments with. Here, though, the big choice comes in: where are you living? What passport do you hold? Where do you see yourself in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And can that company service you in that jurisdiction? Can they pay out to you in that jurisdiction? If your plans is, you don't plan on coming back to South Africa, you plan on retiring on a beach in Thailand, or you plan to go and live in Europe, in the Black Forest or something, or you want to maybe live in South America, or yeah, will your investments be able to pay out to you there where you are, and will you be able to be serviced there? That's, when it comes to choosing that fund. In terms of Holborn, we're an advisory, so we don't have any investment funds. We don't invest the money with ourselves. Our job as an advisory is to say, right, for you, Tabisa, for example, you have a South African passport, you're living here, you plan to one day end up there. You might come back to South Africa, but you really see yourself over here. Right. So which company, based on your risk profile, that can do what it is that your goal is, and what your targets are, which company can help us get you there, which companies and which countries? And then we will often go and we'll compare that, and we'll put that into what's called a suitability report, where we'll then go, I do that with all my clients, say, right, if you end up there and you this passport holder, you wanted to be able to do this, I recommend, in terms of this country, that would be the best low tax or no tax jurisdiction for you to be able to do what you want to do. So company A, B, and C, those are the best companies in that particular country. And then we would go and compare, right, with company A, B, and C, what are the differences in their fees, their costs, their bonuses, their the structures, what are the pros and cons, and ultimately say, right, for you to be to be able to achieve what you want to achieve, it's actually company A, or it's company B, for example, C, whatever, in that country. And within that, with these in particular investment funds, that's what will get you to where you need to be. Hopefully that answers your sort of question when it comes to choosing. And this is the thing, there are lots, absolutely lots. So you need to know, something I tell most clients, it's very different in South Africa, back home. If you want to save for retirement, there are these nice off-the-shelf solutions, as we call them, versus the way that we do it from an international perspective, like Lego. Every client is different. Every client's goals, where they plan to end up, where they're currently living, where they come from, where they plan to be it's different. So you need to put that puzzle together and find a solution that fits that particular client. Back home, you want to save for retirement, no matter which company you go to, they're going to give you a retirement annuity. Or they'll give you a tax-free savings account, depending on how much you want to save. The other side of it is, if you want to save your kids' education, they've got these lovely little products, particularly for kids' education. Everyone fits into these nice little boxes. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, what your goals are, what your plans are, you fit into these nice little boxes. There's just so much more available internationally that it's not a good idea to put someone into a box. Find something that suits them. It's something that I used to find. I was telling someone about that the other day. I was very much into computers as a kid. And the one thing I always found about your shops back home in South Africa when it comes to computers is, there's this game that needs this kind of thing. So I want this graphics card, for example, or I want this sound card, or whatever it is. You go to the computer shop and they say, well, we have this, and this. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for X. No, but you can buy this. Why? Because it's the same as financial services. They, rather than find what you need, will give you what they have. And that's very dangerous, because you're being pushed into a box rather than finding a solution that suits you, your goals, your future plans, where you plan to be. So that's where, again, speak to someone who is internationally qualified, has the licenses and the accreditations, the knowledge and experience to be able to say, right, for you, we can look at a solution in that country. Not we have to find your solution only from company A in South Africa. May I have access to today's webinar? Yes, today's webinar is being recorded, so it will be uploaded, and I will share the links with those of you who are online. Please don't forget to fill out the poll. I see there are quite a few people who have been doing it already. Thank you. That it helps me in terms of making sure that future webinars are more geared towards what clients and people actually really want to hear. Quite a few people on today's call, yet fewer questions. And I'm hoping that's because I've been better at actually maybe conveying what one needs to look at, and also making it a lot clearer in terms of what the goals and targets are. Any other questions? So at the bottom of your screen, you will see there's a little Q&A box, and you can type your questions into there. I've answered the ones so far that are on. There are a few technical questions that I see I've been sent privately, but I will answer those offline. Right. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for another question. So yes, the polls are only for those that are in Asia, but it is applicable to those who are in the UAE. I've been asked quite a few times to adjust, not adjust, but to try and do a webinar specifically for the UAE. The only big thing that comes obviously in with the UAE is that's very nice is that depending on which country, in most countries, you don't have to worry about the tax side of it. Again, though, surprisingly enough, you'd be surprised how many people, and I speak to them on a daily basis, you're living in a country where you pay 0% tax, but I'll go and send my money back to a country where I'll pay tax at a higher rate. Or I'll go put my money into something where I have to pay tax in it when it comes out. Makes absolutely no sense. Just rather keep it where you're not paying taxes. Again, though, you need to structure it so that you have access to it wherever you go eventually. There are pros and cons to a lot of different jurisdictions. So Dirk, thank you for that question. It is only for the Asia, the way it's worded, but it is applicable to the UAE as well, and to many of your Middle Eastern countries. It's literally, I think, only the first question is, are you in Asia or at home? So just say you're at home, and I will still know what it's about. Right. Any other questions? How can you get in touch with me? So I did add it to the previous webinar. I haven't with this. So you can find me on Facebook. It's www.facebook.com/offshore investments. That's my web page, my official Facebook page. Or you can reach out to me on, I'm surprised I didn't add it to this webinar. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Matthew Taron, and you should be able to find me very easily. Or you can send me a WhatsApp. I'll give you my WhatsApp number. It's 062 812 9304. I'll repeat that. So for WhatsApp, it's 062 812 9304, and that's the South African number, so +27. I remote work for an offshore company. So yeah, the easiest way though, find me on Facebook, facebook.com/offshore investments, or find me Matthew.Taron. I'm usually very easy to find. Let me see if I can actually very quickly load one of my previous webinars that at least allows making finding me a little easier to see. Right. Any more questions? How can I access the element of risk when choosing investments? Okay, so something I found when it comes to clients, risk, there are different types of risks. Now, some clients are worried about what happens if the company goes bust, or what happens if the company gets bankrupt for some other reason, or this or that, or someone runs off with my money. Those are what we call institutional risks. Well, there are ways of limiting that. There are some, like if you look in South Africa, if you put your money with a bank, this is a new concept in South Africa, or if you have money with an investment company and the company goes bust, then as the law stands now, from the June onwards, you will get 100,000 back. So if you got 50,000 Rand, great, you'll get your 50,000 back. If you got 600,000 or 300,000, and you got 2 million, you'll still only get 100,000 back, which is not particularly great. But there are other jurisdictions around the world. For example, in Europe, it's 200,000 euros, or 4 million, more or less. If we look at the UK, it's 85,000 pounds. But there are other jurisdictions. If we look at, for example, the Isle of Man, they can get up to 90%. So if you've managed to save up, and I have clients who've saved up quite a few million, and the company goes bust, well, at least you get 90% of your money back. And one could ask, well, look, what are the chances, honestly, what are the chances of a company going bust? Well, let's just look at Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers was worth $50 billion when they went bust. And yet still they went down, even with US government backing. So it's one of those where one needs to ask yourselves, you know, if from the institutional risk side of things, if the company goes bust, where is my money? Then from a risk perspective, in terms of am I that slow and safe, or am I that fast and risky, or am that somewhere in between? I like to refer to clients as, are you that, if we put into I don't know why, but I like vehicle analogies. Are you that 1 liter diesel, slow, safe? It'll get you to your destination. It's going to take you longer, but you will get there. Or are you more that 2.9 liter Alfa Romeo? It's got a Ferrari engine. It's safe. I wouldn't call it safe. It is a safe car, but it's exciting. It's exhilarating. You'll more than likely though write yourself off. But you'll have a good time doing so. So where are you? Are you that slow and safe? Are you that diesel, or are you that Ferrari engine? Or are you perhaps somewhere in between? And that there are a bunch of questions that help you in terms of calculating where exactly, because you get some clients, and I'll be honest, you get some clients who feel they are risky. They want to take as much risk as possible and they want to grow that. And then you do a risk profile with them, and it turns out they're actually a lot more cautious than they thought they were. And you get other clients who are cautious, but they can afford to be more risky. And there it's more about understanding what the client's goals are, where they want to be, how much time they have, what their risk profile is, and then finding something that suits that. And very often, unlike you'll find in international sphere, we'll use very often well, I like to use a core satellite approach. So you'll have you diversify. You have at least 8 different funds within your investment portfolio, and you'll have some of them which are in line perfectly with your risk profile, some of them which are slightly more cautious, and some of them that are slightly more growth in nature, more aggressive. The core being what's, that 60-70% of portfolio that's in line with what you need and what you like. A few slightly cautious and a few then slightly more aggressive. That way, when you do reviews, you can learn what is affecting your investment funds, what's making them grow, what's keeping some behind, what are the reasons behind, what are they investing in, how are markets actually impacting them. And inherently, as clients learn more about their investments and more about portfolios and portfolio makeup, they start to slowly gain more risk appetite. So very often it's a case of helping to educate clients, and that's how you choose an element of risk, and understanding, results, and diversify. You don't put all your eggs into one basket. Well, even not just 2 or 3 baskets. You need to diversify properly, at least 6, 7, 8 different types of funds. I hope that's helped everyone in terms of that. That's made life a little bit easier for everyone. Any other questions? Let me see. So I've answered that one. I've answered that one. I've answered that one. And then I was looking to actually add, okay, if there are no other questions, so I'm very easily to find online. You can look me up on Facebook, www.facebook.com/offshore investments. The other thing then is that you can find me on Facebook under my own personal name. You see, I'm a real man with a real family, Matthew Turon. Okay, I've answered all those questions. What I will do very lastly and very quickly is just share how you can get hold of me. I see I finally have that up. Oh, not as a slideshow, because then I can't see what I'm doing. Let me load that quickly. And then those who want to reach out, you can take an image or a screenshot of the next screen and reach out to me that way. Reading view. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Thank you to everyone who's taken part in the poll. And let me share that screen, share. Not that one. There we go. You just get to the very end of that. And then I will share that. So I did a webinar a little early in the year and last year as well. Do you send your money back home in terms of if you want to buy property specifically, looking at South African property and UK property or German property as an example? What would the difference be? Or, how does one know where to do that? And we looked at different property returns and different examples of people who bought property abroad versus buying property back home. Um, okay, there we go. Share. For those of you who want to know how to get hold of me, um, there we go. So you'll see I'm also an admin on a lot of the expat groups, and I'm the group expert on a lot of the expat groups as the financial person. I am on WeChat, Matthew Taron, or Kakao Talk, also Matthew Taron. WhatsApp, my office number is there. I don't remember the office number as easily as my personal one, which is why the one I gave earlier is my personal. That's the office one. You'll get a faster response from that. Or you can email me, matthew.taron@holbornassets.com. Otherwise, Facebook Messenger, Matthew.Taron, 1975, giving my age away there. I should somehow find a way to change that. But yes, there we go. Hopefully that helps everyone in terms of those who would like to be able to reach out. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to chatting at some point and seeing you at perhaps future webinars. Thank you. Let me stop.